Are you a B2B company that uses podcasts to grow your company's revenue? Well, if so, you are invited to the B2B Pod Con. It is the premier podcast conference in the B2B space. It will take place November 11th through 13th in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. Just a short walk from some of the best music and food you'll find anywhere. Learn from some of the best in the industry and connect with hundreds of your peers. Tickets are on sale with early bird pricing going through August 9th. After August 9th, the price is going to go up, so don't miss out on the best prices you will see before the event. Go to b2bpodcon.com, get your tickets. Information's in the show notes, b2bpodcon.com. It seems like the opportunities for this are only limited to our imagination. Learning more about private podcasts, or even like we talked about, even for sales enablement, it really can remove some limitations that we've had. How are you seeing companies use this?
Yeah, so we found really there's an unlock when we started to introduce just the audio studio where they could just have full control of how that audio was configured. So definitely we're seeing folks, create that audio template and generate kind of consistently publishing podcasts based on their content, and also use that to leverage into YouTube channels and layer it atop with visuals. So we're seeing that absolutely. But with the new kind of capabilities of full control and full customization on a piece by piece basis, we're seeing folks, do voiceovers for their own videos and do the voiceover and scripting through the platform. We're seeing folks use the various kind of preset templates that we have to generate audiograms and snippets for social. We're seeing folks, and this is all the kind of ways that they're able to transform the content. But in terms of the underlying, what it is that they're turning into audio, oh man, the sky is the limit. Definitely learning and development.
Welcome to It's Marketing's Fault, the podcast where we discuss how to do marketing the right way. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford, and I'm excited today because I'm with me Logan Underwood. He is the CEO and co-founder of Adauris, which enables marketing teams to repurpose existing written content and be able to put it into audio at 10 times the speed. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be on and share more about what we've been building and all things audio.
I love it. So let's just kind of start with that moment, right? So when did you come up with this idea for Adauris, and what was that moment like?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the revelation that led to Adauris was a mix of, personal experience with also professional. So on an individual level, I found myself, during school commuting a lot, and that led to realizing that I was always switching over to audio content, audio books, podcasts, and the like. And the more research I did around this general trend of listening and how often people are listening over reading, I realized at large, people spend around 9 times as much time listening to spoken word audio content, be it radio, audio books, and increasingly podcasts than they do reading. And so, yet when you look around, what I found was that the vast majority of thought leadership, of information, of content that was online was still published in primarily written form. And so that was then the kind of the point at which we began to think about building Adauris, was if we can make it easier to transform that existing written content, knowledge into audio, create engrossing and engaging experiences, then both the publishers and creators benefit, but also you and I as a consumer, because audio just fits so much better into your day, be it walking a dog, commuting. There's so many more opportunities to consume over audio than read. And so why not bring all of that information into a more accessible format? And so everyone benefits and people get the most value out of what's out there. So that was really the aha moment came on, the commute, but it was the beginning of just a deep dive into kind of the trends we're seeing across how people choose to consume information and going from there.
So then what is Adauris? Because it's taking text to audio, just kind of give us the big picture overview of how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adauris, simply put, is a platform that enables marketing teams and publications to take their existing written content, be it newsletters, blogs, articles, and transform that into podcast-ready audio using AI. So we help with the scripting to create broadcast-ready, script from that source piece of written content. And then we work with our partners to create essentially an audio template that allows for them to have that audio reflect their brand and customizations as they would desire. And at which point they've set up this template, it then can become hands-off, where every time they publish a new piece of content, we're using AI, synthetic speech, to put in musical intonations, post-production elements, generating audio within 30 seconds to 1 minute of that content being posted. And we can distribute that audio, either embedding it directly on page to drive higher engagement and dwell time, or automatically distributing it to platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube for greater reach and distribution. So we really, simply put, are trying to be the Canva for audio production. We want to be the marketer's go-to tool for audio production, making it as easy as possible for them to get started, repurpose content at 10x the speed.
I think it's a brilliant comparison to become the Canva for audio production, because everybody knows, like, I can use Canva, right? Like, Photoshop breaks me out in a cold sweat, but like, I can use Canva.
Exactly.
So using that, that's a brilliant comparison. So many questions that come to mind after that description. Let me back up one step. You mentioned, like, when you start working with a company, you sort of get their content sort of script ready. What does that look like? Is that a one-time thing? How's that work?
Yeah, so it really depends on what the company is looking for. If, for instance, they have an existing catalog, a blog that they share, user case studies and thought leadership through. Sometimes that has been created for consuming via reading, right? And so you're going to find there might be sentences that are longer than how you and I would speak in conversation. There are certain visual cues, headings, subheadings, bullet points, that if you and I were to read that verbatim, it wouldn't necessarily sound great. And so what we've done is we've worked with production engineers and folks in the podcasting world to some extent to start to try and understand, like, what are the simple things that they look at when considering how to convert an article into a podcast or begin to make it broadcast ready, and help and use AI to actually then begin to make those transformations. So shortening some of the sentences so that it's easier to follow when you're just listening, taking bullet points and repurposing those into full sentences. These are some of the transformations that we're helping to make. That's in the instance where the source content is the blogs. But there are instances, for instance, we worked with Google, for example, to take a newsletter content and turn that into a podcast. And that required kind of a greater degree of scripting to create something that was very conversational and yet preserve the same information. And what we saw is that there was 40% increase in engagement with the newsletter, and they were able to have much higher activation of the community because no longer were they having to fight against inbox fatigue. So now they had an audio, to accompany that and distribute to where they would like, be it podcasting or embedding it within the newsletter itself.
So like they would, for example, with the newsletter, they would take the newsletter, convert it into audio, embed the audio link into like an email, send both the hard copy, forgive me, the email copy, the written copy, there we go, the written copy and the audio link in the same email. And that because it was in audio, it's getting like 40% more engagement. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's exactly
Wow.
right. Simply because what we find is people particularly in the mornings or the evenings, when they'll be on their phones and checking their email. And if it's easier to click and listen passively as they would any other podcast than read, like they're much more likely to click in and out. They'll listen simply because it just fits their habits better.
Wow. So then it sounds like you could also, as you were saying, you could flip it into a podcast and almost take these newsletters, make them into like 2 to 4 minute episodes, so to speak, dump them in a podcast feed, a podcast channel, and make it available either private, public, however.
Exactly. So take, for instance, there's a publication. So we work with 150 plus publications and brands. And one such partner, the Tyee, they're a publication based in British Columbia, Canada. They have their articles set to be uploaded to Spotify as an audio version. And so on any given day, as they publish articles, they'll have a 20-minute podcast, they'll have a podcast, a 4-minute quick, episode based on what they're publishing. And they've been able to split that into different feeds. So suddenly, rather than being, a pure play written content publication, they're now a multimedia platform, and they can reach their audiences in a myriad of ways. It's more accessible. And because that audio content is tied to their cadence of publishing written content, they're always at the top of Spotify. So that's something that actually, like, marketers are really, love, is that they can get their logo to the top of Spotify because of just the refresh rate is a lot higher than it would be if you were just doing more of a traditional podcast or limited run. So there's just so many ways that audio can help, build your awareness, build your engagement.
Wow. That's fascinating. Just the ability to convert the text into audio. I love how you're talking about it moves it to the top of Spotify, because if you are publishing content, written content on a daily basis, a multiple times a day basis, if it automatically happens, it immediately flips it to the top. That's a game changer. And it also sounds like too, companies are really embracing this idea of being media companies, not just like I help customers. Like this idea of media company is really beginning to catch on. Do you see that? Or is that something like you're having to teach people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think increasingly what you're seeing, and we've seen this in the tech industry in particular, is that there are companies that will acquire either newsletters or media companies in their own right, just use that to create and leverage a community. And there is something absolutely to be said with the more that you can create and foster a community around great high quality content, be it thought leadership, case studies, or even just information not necessarily directly related to your own company, but the space at large. There's a lot there in terms of historically how they've thought about it. And now they're realizing, the play is multimedia, video, audio. These are just formats that are more conducive to consuming at all times of day, right? Like it's rare that I think you'll find people sitting down and spending 45 minutes reading the next white paper that's been published or your research piece. But I think it's very common still for folks to be listening to, hour, 2 hour long podcasts. And so it's just what fits into the user's day. And you know what? The super users of audio are executives and the youth. And these are two audiences that are particularly important and of interest to a large majority of enterprises out there. They want to be able to nurture their sales call and get in front of the people making the purchasing decisions. And what better way than podcasts, because those are often the busiest people. And you know what? That's where audio can just be such a great benefit.
It really is, because you don't have to be in front of a screen. You can consume it anywhere. I like that idea too. This really opens the possibilities, because suddenly if you have, however many white papers, 10, 20, 30, maybe you've been doing white papers for 5 years. Suddenly you can immediately convert those into a podcast. Suddenly you've got, 20, 30, 50 episodes that are available for somebody to listen to and really get to know your company. And they're not having to go look for them. It can go right to their Spotify feed. It can go right to their Apple feed. You can just dump it as a playlist. I was talking with somebody the other day that in Spotify, you can create playlists within your own content. You could share that playlist. So this really opens the door for what companies can do, especially if companies have been text heavy or primarily text, because you say you're working primarily with publishing companies. Is that correct?
So we work with a lot of content marketing teams as well as publications. We got our start working with publications, and we work with folks like Texas Tribune and Grist out of California and Harvard and Stanford. And what we were able to really learn through this initial phase was that we could create highly listenable, engaging audio experiences that pass that high threshold of editorial while still maintaining full automation and using AI to generate these audio experiences. And those insights and that grounding of, having 10 plus million downloads is what enabled us to take this same offering and really start to make it finely tuned for marketing teams and enterprise, because they similarly really care about, can we increase dwell times? Can we increase click through to other pieces of content? And then also, if you've been publishing and spending a lot of resources creating great studies and information, then you're really looking at, how do we repurpose? How do we redistribute, maximize the value that we're in these pieces? And that's where something like Adauris comes in, is we can suddenly make it easier to create audio at a speed that maximizes your momentum and allows for you to repurpose and test new channels in a way that previously you couldn't. So yeah, it's been a great learning experience, and we're excited to just grow and push what's possible in audio.
And I think what you're talking about, that repurposing aspect, that's huge, because from a podcasting standpoint, if for people out there, for businesses, companies who are already creating podcasts, that's, I often talk about that idea of it being a foundational piece that you can then take it and chop it up and repurpose it and do all that stuff with it. What it sounds like what Adauris is doing then is it's just flipping the foundational piece and just putting it into audio, which it seems like that's just makes repurposing easier for more companies.
Definitely. And that's the thing, is like, what we found is companies and businesses often will recognize that audio is an important channel to nurture and engage their audience and prospects, will pursue or create some fantastic podcasts. But the next step is, when they begin to see those succeed, they're looking at, how do we expand our presence into audio? How do we grow this channel? Now, it can be very logistically difficult to set up multiple, interview series based podcasts, but that's where what we're helping companies understand is they're sitting on a wealth of information and fantastic knowledge and value that we just simply, by repurposing it and making it possible to bring into audio, can help expand their audio presence, help expand what they've already been doing and seeing succeed. So I think, fundamentally, like, the future that we see and we look towards is one where, information is available in whatever medium is most suitable to you or I, the consumer. Like, there will eventually be a day where you're not forced to make a trade-off because you want to read or engage with something that, a brand or a company has published, or even, a newsroom. You will be able to, listen to it or watch the video or read it, and it will suddenly be so much easier to fit that into your barrier to access just keeps coming down. So that's kind of what gets us excited, and we just see that as an inevitability. So we want to make that happen.
Absolutely. So let me ask, as you were talking with, we'll call it, potential clients, what are a couple of their most common objections to this idea of text to audio, and like, how do you respond to them? How do you answer them?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, number one objection, although we're seeing this change day by day, is skepticism on, can we create something that passes the muster, to reflect our brand, to be very and highly listenable. And so that is where, what we point to and what we show and demonstrate is we're building these audio experiences off of this wealth of experience, building for editorial and on, millions of downloads and listens. And our system understands and increasingly learns what it takes to produce and the most engaging piece of audio for that respective piece of content. And so that's the starting point. But then it's really, making sure we're working with them to set up that audio template so they can hear and listen and understand the quality that they can come to expect. So what we've seen is that, as the technologies are improving at a rate that's just absolutely breathtaking in terms of the synthetic speech, the ability for bringing in musical production elements and the like. And so we're very, very optimistic and have been seeing, once they hear what we're able to produce, some pleasant surprise. I'd say the second piece of objection is oftentimes around like being able to measure traction and resonance of the audio. And this is where the conversation that we like to have with them is, better understanding, okay, when you're creating content and creating, this information to nurture these sales campaigns, yes, you can think about the CTAs and the conversions, but on those high performing pieces, the more impressions, the more top of funnel that they can drive. If they already have strong performing pieces, that's where the ROI ends up making the most sense. And so we think of ourselves as a magnification and a multiplier effect on what they already have and know is working. You can't put lipstick on a pig and, suddenly expect a whole different outcome, right? And so it works when you have a strong base, when quality content that's already performing and adding value to their audience. That's when, audio can just be a much more fantastic boost. And that's where, we're focused on providing rich analytics. The advantage that we have is because we help them generate the audio and then distribute, we act as the host. So we can understand how many people are engaging with this piece of audio across all of the platforms, be it on Page, be it on Spotify, be it on YouTube. So we can measure, and this is how many downloads, this is on average the time spent listening, completion rates, top performance. So just by creating this pipeline of generating audio to distributing audio, we're able to really field a lot of those analytics that they care about.
So let me go a little bit deeper on that, because it sounds then like, so with normal podcasts, we'll say the process is you upload your file into an aggregator. Like I use Buzzsprout, I've used Simplecast, there's a variety of them. And then from there, they push them out to Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all the distribution points. So am I hearing correctly? What you're saying is when companies work with you and they upload and their text to audio files, then you then push that out to those networks like Apple, Spotify, and so forth?
Exactly. So we act as a built-in, Buzzsprout or whatever podcast host that you use. We're doing the exact same thing. And the reason is we think that the most value comes from having a single platform where you can end-to-end generate and distribute audio. So it's your control panel into your audio presence. And so we do the same thing, is that you've generated that piece of audio from your blog. Now you can select essentially where you would like that to be distributed: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or embedded on Page, because we create, and allow our users to have highly customizable audio players. And that's where they can then get an additional fidelity of information and data directly through the Adauris platform, watching and seeing kind of average completion rates, the demographics of who is listening, the difference between listeners and non-listeners in terms of how they engage with other pieces of content. And so we're trying to be that single space to give you the high level view of really how your audio as a segment is performing.
That sounds like a lot more detail or access to information that you guys have and can provide to your customers than most podcasters can get, because like there's only so much from various podcastings. There's only so much information you can give, but it sounds like you're able to go deeper and more granular on some of the results because you are the hub.
Yeah. And this is where it can get quite technical, but what we do is, we can look at the proportion of listeners that are coming from on page versus the podcasting platforms or wherever you distributed, and take a sample and understand, if this is how people are engaging with your on page player, then, this can start to fill in that higher degree, that greater fidelity of understanding in terms of how people are consuming on the podcasting side as well. And so there's just tremendous advantages when you start to the whole kind of flow from generation to distribution all within a single container.
Absolutely. That's very significant. And so for everybody listening, that data is not readily available in a lot of cases. So the fact that you guys are able to provide that's a huge win for your customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been one of the most requested and pleasing features of the platform for sure.
So let me ask this: let's talk about voice. So is it so you feed the text in, and I'm speaking in broad generalities, but the text comes in, it gets converted into audio. Do you just pick a type of voice? Can you use your own voice? Can you switch the languages? Like how's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So take the most sophisticated, technology that you're seeing out there on the market today, and we're incorporating and making all of that possible within our platform. So absolutely, you can do, replicate your own voice and voice clone in order to use that to narrate content. You have hundreds of voices, also languages to then use in terms of narrating your content. And what we found is there's two primary ways people will use the platform. If they want a high degree of customization, we have a audio studio that they can go in, select, and even different narrators for different paragraphs, or set rules like unique narrators for headings versus subheadings versus captions and the like. And then also control tone and pacing and musical elements throughout that piece. That gives them, as much possible configuration options as we can afford at this time, just with where the technology is at. But what's also possible is that you set up, a standard template. You have that CTA from your CMO or from your editorial staff that's letting your audience know that this is an audio version of your blog. You have a tailored CTA. Maybe you also have a sponsor that you're putting in there. And with that, they can then begin to really set and forget. So we have numerous integrations with Jasper and HubSpot and all of the content management systems. And so just by making those integrations, essentially you've set up your template and then you're good to go. You have full control of, the cadence of how that gets pushed out and to where, but it's not then incumbent on you to go in every time and make this audio in a bespoke fashion. So that's, we've seen be really critical, because a lot of marketing teams are, trying to be as efficient as possible and under strain from the organization to do more with less. And so we're trying to work within those confinements and still create the best product possible.
I agree. And that's something, as I work with people, it's this idea of how do you make fewer touch points, faster process, simpler process, as simple as you can make it. So set and forget is like the optimum, to where it's you create, and then it's just you punch the button every time and it just happens. That's like the ideal. And it sounds then like you have, from a production standpoint and the template standpoint, you're there. And the way the technology is going just is mind blowing in terms of what keeps coming out. So it sounds like a lot of the questions people may be having today, even like by next year, some of those sort of technological hiccups or hesitancies or things that they want, but we just can't do yet. It sounds like the roadmaps, the ceiling's high.
Absolutely. And I think when we look back, ChatGPT and OpenAI, some 18, 19 months ago, just like how much has changed since then. And so, that dotted line isn't, that the slope of progress, I don't think is flattening anytime soon here. And so this is what, makes us optimistic is we're trying to ultimately just create the infrastructure so that it's as easy as possible to create great sounding audio that's engaging and shares really that information and valuable knowledge that right now is just locked in written form. And one of the, I guess, like questions and things that we sometimes hear is like, oh, well, won't this replace podcasts? And there's this fear that this is a replacement. And I think it's somewhat misplaced in that there is never going to be a replacement, for this kind of conversation where it's between two people, it's back and forth. Like you're interested in the host, you're engaged and follow the personalities and the liveliness. And so we're never trying to, do anything to take away from that. We're trying to supplement and make it possible to just bring more things into audio. And when the content is really focused on information that could be valuable to your job, to your life, to your work, that's just by making it and bringing it into audio, we can help and also just create a larger ecosystem of what's available and possible in audio. And that's going to help sponsorships. That's going to help advertising. That's going to help, brands looking to do audio placements. They now have a greater selection and there's just the ecosystem.
Yeah, it sounds very much like it, it raises all boats, right? Everybody will benefit. And, as I'm thinking through it, especially, I want to call it archived content, but like content that is way down the scroll or like page 9 or page 10 of what's available, suddenly that becomes new and fresh. I mean, if it's applicable, you can easily move it forward, and then that almost like doubles or triples the amount of content you can put out simply by converting your last 10 years worth of newsletter, so to speak, into audio form. Like suddenly you can, like the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. I think, and this is where, like companies' back catalogs are a wealth of information, and there's only so much that they can serve up and try and focus on making sure ranking, at the top. And so the easier that you can provide them with a tool set where suddenly, there's a 10 episode series that is leveraging the insights of, content and research that was done 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. So what have you, like, that just, it adds channels and it adds just a myriad of new ways that you can interact and shape and sort and promote and drive attention and share what you've as a brand have already created.
So it seems like the opportunities for this are only limited to our imagination. So like, are you seeing companies use this? I've been on this, been learning more about private podcasts, or even like, we talked about, even for training, even for sales enablement, like really when you take it really can remove some limitations that we've had. How are you seeing companies use this?
Yeah. So we found really there's an unlock when we started to introduce just the audio studio where they could just have full control of how that audio was configured. So definitely we're seeing folks, create that audio template and generate kind of consistently publishing podcasts based on their content, and also use that to leverage into YouTube channels and layer it atop with visuals. So we're seeing that absolutely. But with the new kind of capabilities of full control and full customization on a piece by piece basis, we're seeing folks, do voiceovers for their own videos and do the voiceover and scripting through the platform. We're seeing folks use the various like kind of preset templates that we have to generate audiograms and snippets for social. We're seeing folks, and this is all the kind of ways that they're able to transform the content. But in terms of the underlying, like what it is that they're turning into audio, oh man, the sky is the limit. Definitely learning and development. You're seeing, it's quite hard to understand like how far someone scrolled or read through and the content. And a big focus for learning and development teams is making sure that their employee base is effectively, able to be kept up to speed with all the changes in industry. And so bringing that into new private formats like private podcasts or just making it more accessible for a page. Yeah, there's a whole spectrum. And it just like, this is when you start to think of, well, written content is just the base, that everything today is built on. And so once you start to consider that as the possible, addressable segment to turn into audio, there's so many different use cases here. Marketing teams for blogs, newsletters, learning and development, training, community engagement. So a lot of community-based, more like the younger tech companies, like they're trying to see how they can engage their audiences across YouTube and engage their community because that's a big platform. And so, yeah, there's been many. It's been fun to see just like what the use cases that emerge from video voiceover to learning to YouTube courses, etc.
I love it. I love the way that this opens the door for repurposing, for bringing old to the forefront. I think from a very tactile way, you look at even the publishing industry with books, books go out of print. And so like you hear about them, but you can't ever find a copy. And I think a lot of companies, a lot of publications, there's stuff's out there. It's good stuff, but it just needs to be brought to the forefront so it's visible again. And this is a great way to do it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I may be biased, but I think there's rarely an instance where just by bringing something into more mediums you can do. And we're seeing that in terms of like with publications, folks who listen or donate much more in enterprise and brands. The people who listen are engaging and much more likely to sign up for newsletters and even purchase. And so there's so many ways that I think this will become incorporated into the enterprise, and we're in the early days yet because it's only really just become possible to do something to this end. So
that's fascinating. That's fascinating the way that we were describing even donations, then maybe engagement, because audio does so much about its trust building, right? And just hearing the voice, you're having the conversation. This is what I try and encourage people with is, the beauty of podcasting specifically, but really it's the audio content. It's the podcast is just sort of the medium, so to speak. That's the recording part, but the audio brings you into this place where trust is built because you're in their ears as they're driving, as they're running, as they're doing stuff. And like, that's all they're hearing. So the trust value skyrockets. So I can believe things like donations, things like more subscribers. They have to be, those are tangible things that I'm sure you're going to be able to point to and help people say, hey, look, here's what we know. Here's the data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've seen this play out again and again. It's just, you're creating a more immersive, full experience for your audience. And you're presenting them with more opportunities to engage. And if you're doing your job and creating great value of the content and the information that you're trying to available for folks, that's just going to see a big lift. And yeah, so we're very encouraged, for what the future holds.
Absolutely. So one takeaway before we wrap up, one takeaway for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say one takeaway is that, your existing what you've already created is worth more than you know. Like the blog that you already have, the newsletter that you already have written, there is value that is locked in simply because of the format that it's been created. And there's ways to unlock a lot more from what you've already done. You're sitting on a lot more of an asset. And this is one way to really try and leverage that and drive higher ROI.
I love that. What you already have is worth much more than you already know. I love that. That's a beautiful description. So Logan, if people want to know more about you, more about Adauris, where would you like them to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us either on our website or, on LinkedIn, ADAURIS.ai. We have a free trial that folks can sign up, create an account, create an audio, and see how it sounds. And if you fall in love, then you're welcome to just explore kind of how far you can take that audio creation process. So yeah, looking forward to hopefully seeing some folks check it out, and we're on all the socials and the like. So go check out the website.
Excellent. So we're going to drop that website and all the links in the show notes. Make sure you check it out. It's a fascinating service. Audio is not dead. Like the rumors are not, like those are false rumors. Audio really, I think, is just getting ready to take off even more. So Logan, this has been a blast. Thanks for joining me today. I've learned a ton.
Thanks so much, Eric. Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk and share kind of what we're seeing and what gets us excited also about the future. So like you said, I think, the sky's the limit, and we're just getting started in terms of what we can do with leveraging technology to create more immersive experiences.